Greetings to our viewers. I am Commodore Srikant B Kesnur, and we from the Maritime Knowledge Syndicate bring you a monthly podcast on various maritime and strategic issues. This time, in Maritime Conversations, we bring to you a somewhat different topic. It has a maritime dimension, but its imprint on the strategic and military space is much larger. Ladies and gentlemen, July is an important month in the calendar of war and conflict in Indian subcontinent. We have been commemorating Kargil, 25 years of Kargil, in a dignified, sober way, celebrating the bravery of those who evicted the Pakistani troops and remembering those who were killed in action. While Kargil undoubtedly needs to be celebrated, we seem to have kept in the background another operation that lasted for 3 years and which began in July. It was on the 29th of July 1987 that the India Sri Lanka Peace Accord was signed. Immediately thereafter, Indian troops were in action in Sri Lanka and they stayed there for almost 3 long years. Friends, Operation Pawan was India's longest peace support operation. Despite that, the amount of mentions about Operation Pawan in our strategic discourse is often muted or difficult. One wonders why, because this operation, in many ways, saw the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy operating together. It was a joint operation. It could be called a theater of sorts. And yet, 35 years later, there is a sense of uh, thought, even perhaps a lament, that we have not done enough either to learn the lessons from Operation Pawan or remember those who took part in it. Therefore, our episode today is Operation Pawan Legacy and Lessons. To discuss Operation Pawan, friends, I have with me four esteemed panelists, each of whom has played an active part in the operation at different stages. I call upon our first panelist, Colonel Nair. Now, Colonel Nair was commissioned in the Regiment of Artillery and thereafter he was in the Corps of Intelligence. Colonel Nair has spent lots of time in the army, more than 31 years, and some of that time was spent in Operation Pawan. He has authored two books about Operation Pawan, in fact, co authored them with our next panelist, that is Colonel Atul Kochar. Welcome, Colonel Atul Kochar. Uh, Colonel Kochar has spent 22 years in the army. He's been an infantry soldier. He was also involved in Op Pawan. He's been involved in Operation Parakram and Chekapur too. So you can see he has rich legacy of service and operations. And Colonel Kochar has, along with Colonel Nair, co-authored two books on Operation Pawan. I will ask them about these books later. And they have been at the forefront of a campaign to bring Pawan into the public memory and public consciousness. Our third panelist is Commodore Joseph. Commodore Joseph from the Indian Navy, Mishik Seva Medal. As a young officer, was involved with the Indian Naval Liaison Team for Operation Pawan and operated in small ships, minesweepers, and amphibious ships in Operation Pawan. Subsequently, of course, he went on to command other ships and have a very distinguished tenure in the Navy, but he retains his connection to Pawan. He has spoken and written about this extensively too, and I'll be asking him not just about the Navy's role, but about various aspects of the legacy of Pawan. Our fourth panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is Air Commodore Nitin Sathe. Air Commodore Nitin Sathe is a helicopter pilot who's flown about 6,000 hours on helicopters. He's commanded the attack helicopter squadron in Congo. And again, like our other three panelists, he has been an evangelist of sorts, talking about the Air Force at different forums, including writing a special monograph on the role of Air Force in Operation Pawan for the Center of Air, for the Center for Air Power Studies. So, friends, I have with me four very esteemed panelists with deep knowledge of Operation Pawan. Welcome to you all. Welcome to Maritime Conversations.
Thank you, Commodore Kesnur, for your very kind words.
So, we sort of jump into this topic, and I will begin with you, sir, Colonel Nair, and followed by Colonel Kochar, because, like I said, you've been in the forefront of a campaign to bring back power into national consciousness, so to say. So I wanted to ask you, there certainly is a feeling that despite this operation lasting for 3 years, despite the scale, 1174 killed in action, 3,500 wounded, one Paramveer Chakra, six Mahavir Chakra, 98 Veer Chakras, which means many more Sena medals, Nausena medals, and Vayu Sena medals. Despite the humongous the scale of this campaign, why is it that official India or officially the armed forces seem a bit diffident or shy about commemorating Operation Pawan? Do you feel that there has been a little bit of hesitancy in marking the legacy of this very important operation in whatever way we see it? Kanlan?
Yes, exactly. You've said it very correctly. There is, in our endeavors, we've been at it for the last 4 or 5 years now, trudging through the corridors of power in South Block and Sena Bhavan and elsewhere. And we do sense this kind of reluctance on the part of the senior leadership, whether in service, some of them even retired, who don't want to kind of acknowledge that the Indian Army, had done this first out of country operation on such a scale. And frankly speaking, I am quite at a loss as to why we should be shy about it. Soldiers fight on the orders that are given to them by their commander in chief. We don't take illegal orders. Legally, we were sent to an operation. We went there and gave it our best. Like you said, 1164 odd people gave up their lives, and yet we are shy about acknowledging the fact that we have this shining example of an army which goes to a neighboring country, and we don't stay there. I mean, this has never been the ethos of our Indian army. We went into Bangladesh, we liberated it, and within 2 months we were back home. We didn't have occupy territory or try to gain political advantage over there. That is just not the way the Indian army works. But then why are we being so shy about it? I really have no answer.
Uh, Colonel Kocher, Colonel Nair, I think, puts it perfectly when he says, why are we being shy about an operation where we went and did our best? Now, often some people have talked about the strategic outcomes of the war, and we'll discuss that a little. Was it a stalemate or not? But irrespective of whatever happened at the strategic level, at the operational level, people fought and fought hard, and none can be a better example of that than you yourself, who were there. We have this strange situation wherein you have a national war memorial. The people who were killed in action in Op Pawan are mentioned in the national war memorial. And yet, while you have a formal function for 1971 and Kargil, and you have our leaders go and do service at the war memorial that Sri Lankan government has built for the Indian peacekeeping force in Colombo, we don't have a formal commemoration of the event. I know you have been pushing for this, and for the last few years, 29th July, you have pushed people along with Colonel Nair and others to get people to commemorate this event. Can you fill us a little bit more on that? Your own efforts as well as as the reluctance of the government or services headquarters to have a formal function to commemorate the legacy of Pawan?
Well, firstly, commemoration is a remembrance, and it should not be mixed up with any political or any other issue. You are just remembering people who are not there, those who are killed in action, and those they have left behind, and of course, there are the wounded. So these are the two main categories who have suffered and suffered a lot, and the wounded guys they are suffering even more. And so it should not be mixed up with anything else. That's as simple as that. Now there's a learning curve, and we must adopt best practices. If you go to the US, see the US in where this thing entry into Vietnam for about 18, 20 years, they faced the same problem. They were treated as pariahs, and the war veterans of the Second World War did not regard them as veterans. But in spite of that, they corrected this anomaly, and a separate memorial was constructed in US. So that's the sign of a great nation. There is no parochialism, and national interests are supreme, and soldiers are honored. Now, here we have the case which Colonel Nair has said that it's commemorated twice in Colombo near Buttermula, where this memorial was made, and way back in 2009. And in 2014, out of the IPKF core, 21 core came up somewhere in the central sector. It formed the nucleus. They have a memorial, but over a period of time, more names have been added. So there is no exclusive memorial. Anyway, our demand is not for an exclusive memorial. Now, the thing is about what happened is basically national interests have been superseded by political interests. We all know the support the Tamilians got from the local people. We were reviled when we came back. There was nobody to welcome us. And there are Veer Naris who were ostracized. They were told not to attend funerals of their husbands, and all sorts of things happened. But like it's history now, almost 37 years since this happened. We must get over it. Secondly, as far as the whether we won or not is not an issue. I'll raise some interesting point here. Now, Sri Lankan army, they came down ham-handed after we left, but it took them good about 18, 20 years to sort out and finally kill Prabhakaran at the cost of very high number of human innocent lives. Would you call that a victory? A difficult question. At the same time, we stayed there 3 years. We did not massacre people. There were some deviations. It happens in all armies, and that is something we are not proud of. But in our case, we take stern actions against such incidents. So, without creating any mass massacre, we came after 32 months. At the political expediencies, we came and we left. And we
Yeah.
left. There were no major casualties, like I said, but we did a very good job. We conducted both the presidential and the
Uh,
provincial elections. So,
Colonel Patel, I'll
yeah,
come to the I'll come to the strategic aspects separately because I wanted to bring in Air Commodore Sate also into this a little later because we've had some interesting discussions on this. So we'll come back to this. But can you tell us a bit more about the function that you organize on the 29th July every year, so, which you've been doing for last couple of years, so that those who listen to this podcast are aware of your efforts to have a certain commemoration in that regard. So you tell us about that, and I will come to the strategic outcome in the follow-on question.
okay, very briefly, the veterans, we have about 160 odd veterans. We are now doing private commemoration. We take permission from the AG branch, CW, ceremonial and welfare, this thing. They give us the sanction, and we have been doing our own commemoration on the day which marks the signing of the Indo-Sri Lankan Accord, that is 29 July. So every year we have been doing it since 2021. So this year we did the fourth commemoration. This year we actually have done it little earlier because last year we were advised by the AG to do commemoration privately on the date of exit, but that exit unfortunately fell clashed with Holi, that is 24 March. So we shifted it to 20 April. And so this year we did the commemoration 20 April. We have large number, this year we had three Veer Naris, and we have large number of veterans and NCC cadets who come and do the wreath laying. So now this has become, dharma for us, and we have told the Veer Naris and of next of kin that we are there for you irrespective of what the government or the army thinks. If they feel it is not fit to commemorate you, we will do it. We will look after your welfare. We will ensure, we will try to give you closure. We will not shed the tears alone.
So I'm so glad you mentioned this, but I'm also seeing that you were able to get a response from General Malik. So probably there may be a little bit of recalibration going ahead. There might be some sort of recognition for this, I think. So park your thoughts on that. I'll come back to it. I'll now move to Commodore Joseph. Now, Commodore Joseph, the army in its pursuit of either writing its stories or history or reviving its legacy has at least written many books. I mean, between Colonel Kuchar, General Mutana, and others, and then the senior generals. What I think, for example, General Sardesh Pandey wrote, and I think the other commanders also wrote. There are at least a dozen odd books about the armies involved. Now, the Navy, other than a brief mention in our official history book and an odd article in Potterdeck, and some of the things that you have written at forums, there has not been too much spoken about the Navy's involvement. But that was fairly large. You were there. We got, apart from 71, what the other Mahavir Chakra that we got was in Operation Pawan. And the Navy saw large scale operations from Chennai, from other places, smaller ships took part. So, why is it that is the Navy taking its tag of silent service too seriously? Why has there not been enough written by the Navy to mark Operation Power?
Thank you, Srikant, and hello, dear fellow panelists. Happy to be back here. Before I start on that, I have just two bit on the remembrance aspect. Colonel Nair mentioned about ethics. It is also the ethos for soldiers to do their duty, and it's for the seniors, the power that we and the government to repay them and honor them. A soldier should never have to ask. It's an ethos, and it must be reassured and told to people often. The other is the question that you asked: why is it not commemorated enough? Probably in the public eye and in the larger field, people still think of it as a failure. People don't realize, oh, Pawan, as far as the tasks were concerned, it was a success. And in today's world, especially when you talk about helping your neighbor, with China coming and building a port in Hambantota, one can easily understand that one needs to step out and help your neighbor and not have somebody else do it for you. So probably, when we talk on these lines, people will understand the importance of IPKF. Coming back to the recordings of recorded history, yeah, you're right. Transition to Eminence, Admiral Hiranandani's official history of the Navy mentions Op Pawan and mentions it in very little detail. Very little, actually, very, very generic. Commodore Ranjit Rai's book, Warring Navies, also contains a little part, but largely you are right. Most of it has been articles written by some of us. Yeah, we may be equally guilty in not writing enough about it because there are plenty of lessons to be learned, and plenty that we can pick up from there. Like many people won't even realize that the Navy was there even before the accord was signed, and Navy was there well after IPKF withdrew. We had an op Tasha and we continued there. So that is something that many people don't are not even aware. And you are aware, like the small ship operations, the amount of small ships that were involved, SDBs, LCUs, shallow water operations are a big thing today. And most navies come to us. I've been coming to work up. Most navies come to us to learn about shallow water operations. Amphibious, combat beaching. We actually did a combat beaching. We had a combat recce. There's so much to write, so much to learn. And you're right. And I place the blame on some of us as well. We need to be writing more. You're right, absolutely.
We need to be writing more. I'll come back to the point that you passed about of Dasha, the follow-up. Now, to Commander Sathe, does, does the Air Force have a sort of, institutional view about power? On the one hand, the CAPS has authorized you or got you to do a book on airport operations in, of power. So that's a very welcome addition to literature on this subject. But generally, considering that Air Force played a huge role, I mean, in fact, this was an operation that saw all three services involved in a big manner. What is the Air Force's view, official, unofficial, informal, institutional, about Operation Power?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Srikant, for having me on the show, and hello to all the panelists. And I tend to agree with Joseph about what he said about not being inclusive as far as this the commemoration part is concerned. I remember I think that was my squadron 125 squadron which actually did in a role in which we fired and we got fired upon. Other than, of course, the Me-8s who did a little bit of active firing from the helicopters. So we were kind of battle hardened during this operation. And I remember in 1990 when we came back, we did have some ceremony after a year and a couple of years later. Other than that, I remember the Southern Air Command doing some kind of commemoration at their command level because that was the command that took part in the operations. But unfortunately, I think the Indian Air Force also has kind of kept it under the carpet, not really discussed it threadbare. And thankfully, when they asked me to write this, history of the helicopter fleet for the the book called the Indian Air Force in its centennial decade. So this is the book that was brought out, in which I got the opportunity to kind of get into history, go into the old reports and whatever was given in air quarters, and speak to people who actually operated there. And then I got some stories out, and yes, I think we need to do the commemoration part. Although the Air Force really has not done much, in my opinion.
I think, sir, all the panelists have set it up perfectly, wherein I think there is a general consensus that whether in terms of bringing it out to the public or in terms of commemoration, we need to do a lot more. And there have also been questions raised about this possibly happened because the strategic outcome was not seen in a favorable term. So, my second follow-on question to all the panelists, and I'll slightly reverse the order now, is to talk about what are the lessons. We could talk a little bit about the strategic outcomes, and we could talk about the operational outcomes too. But Commodore Swati, everyone has come in on this, and you and I have had discussions. But I think seeing it as a strategic failure or stalemate is wrong, because I think eventually what India did, as even Colonel Kocher brought out, is that you are able to suppress the LTT and suppress it despite fighting with one hand tied to the back, because of which ultimately the final outcome that Sri Lankan forces wanted obtained about a decade later. So, would it be right to relook and conclude that it was not a strategic failure, or it was not uh, the denouement that people thought it was? What are your views on that?
I often fail to understand, Srikant, as to why, in the first place, should you say it as a strategic failure? What was the intent that we went in with? What happened over there? And then, in case we went in support, say, of the LTTE, and if they had kind of won the war, so to say, what would have happened? We would have created one hell of a big problem down south. One big blob down south we'd have to take care of, as we are doing in the north, as we are doing in the northeast, as we are doing in the central part of the country. So we would have created another, little giant out there, which I don't think it would have taken up more of our resources. And at the end of the day, I think whatever be the political aim, I think, and in the long term perspective, as we say in strategy, in the long term perspective, I think we did achieve what we wanted to achieve. Uh, After a few years after we left, of course, it took some time for Sri Lanka to stabilize, and till the time Prabhakaran was out of the scene and normalcy returned to Sri Lanka. So it took some time, but in case it had gone the other way, I don't think it would have been a success story, if I may put it that way.
Uh, that's lovely, sir. You bring it counterfactual here that what if uh, the other outcome had happened. So, Kanan Kocher, I go back to where you had left and where you importantly brought out that look, we did what we had to, and we did it with our hands tied to the back, and we did that as well. So, can you weigh in a bit more now, framing this against the discussions that I had with the Srikant?
Yeah, so continuing with the commemoration part, we met a number of people at the top, like Colonel Nair has said. We found empathy all right, but somewhere the full and final push is not coming. So this is one aspect. I think it's just that the military leadership is not taking it up actively and unnecessarily getting mired in political issues. So we are hopeful that sooner or later it will come through, and our interaction with both AG and even the General Khandare, who is advisor to the Defense Secretary, has been very positive, and he empathizes with us. But like I said, that little bit push is what is lacking, and it has to come. It has to come. There is no way about it. In any case, we as veterans have taken it on ourselves to continue commemoration with our own heft, and that's what we plan to continue.
Okay, great. I think you leave us with a positive note saying that uh, you're hopeful and it is getting the required push and empathy. A little bit more may be needed, but you see light at the end of the tunnel. Colonel Nayan, sir, can you weigh in a bit more both on the strategic outcome because we've discussed that, your opinion on that, and a little bit more on the commemoration if you want to add.
See, to kind of distinguish between strategic outcome, tactical outcome, and all, it really doesn't apply in the case of power. Here, it was basically a political requirement which was converted into a military operation, and the army which went in there never had any clear directions as to what we were supposed to have be doing there. Disarm the militants was a very big catch-all phrase. Who were these militants? At one time, as an intelligence guy, I know there were more than 11 different militant groups, out of which LTT happened to be the strongest. And how to go about bringing their arms, what to do with them thereafter, none of the directions were there. And we worked through centers of power. In Colombo, there was the very powerful ambassador, Mr. Dixit. He was, running his own Op Pawan over there. We had a coterie surrounding the Prime Minister in Delhi, who was again there was different people who had his ear, and they were running their own Op Pawan there. We had the very flamboyant Chief of Army Staff, late General Sundarji, who had his own views about it. We had Dipender Singh as the Army Commander, Southern Command in Pune, who had his own this thing. So it was a very, very confused kind of a thing with no clear chains of command, and people acted the way they thought best. And in that confusion is what today the successors in the chair, when they look back, they don't want to get involved in this because they know that this is something in which they're going to get their elbows up to their elbows in dirt. They don't want to get involved in it. That is why the apathy, towards commemorating the fallen braves of IPKF. And the feeling that IPKF was a failed operation. It was not a failed operation. We very clearly articulated an idea that we have a sphere of influence around us, and we will not allow a third party to come in and play a role there. That was very clear to us. But politics, Tamil politics in Tamil Nadu, Tamil politics in the northern part of Sri Lanka, the Jaffna. Imagine that President Jayawardene, who was then the president of Sri Lanka, he was faced with fires at two ends of his island. The northern, the Tamils were on fire. At the southern end, there was a communist insurgency called the JVP, which was going on. So he very cleverly played on the, inexperience, I would say, or the eagerness of a fresh prime minister who had just taken over power and who wanted to, leave an imprint on the world stage. And we blundered into this operation. And that is how we got involved in it. And even in the army, we know every month we have a kind of parade where the CEO is sitting and all the officers and JCOs are there, and the men are allowed to ask any question and about their administration, about their any problems that they are facing. Signing Sammelan it is called, and we are the CEO is supposed to redress the grievance there. I have attended so many of these signing Sammelans in the island when we were there. The CEOs were stumped when a Nayak or a Havaldar or a GCO got up and said, कि सर मैं 20 महीने से यहाँ घूम रहा हूँ मेरे को छुट्टी नहीं मिल रही है I've got so many problems at home. What are we doing here? Why are we fighting here? Who are we fighting for? And sadly, the CEO didn't have an answer. So that is the apathy that we are facing even today.
Commodore Joseph, this has been framed in two different ways. I think overall there is an agreement on commemorating the legacy. But while Air Commodore Sathe sees it in more optimistic terms, saying that look, the outcome finally was what was probably the best case scenario for India, and we should not look upon it as a failure. Whereas Colonel Nayak maybe gives a bit of a raw edge to what he calls various complexities and certain blunders that occur. Now, you brought out a very interesting thing. The soldier's ethos, and it is for the soldier to do what they have to do, and I'm sure the army and the air force does that. The Navy followed up Op Pawan with Op Tasha. In other words, we continue to be involved, but it is now more of a mutually consultative policing sort of an operation. So the navies continue to be there. It has a certain maritime dimension to it. So this operation requires a little bit of depth negotiating, taking from the past and lessons of common. So how do you see it? Do you see that irrespective of what happened at the strategic level, operationally it was good and we learned our lessons? Or do you feel that going ahead, we have to hoist a lot of other things if we face a similar operation in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Srikant. Let me just put it a little differently. I would think we had no choice but go there. If you have got a problem in in our neighborhood, it is we who have to go there rather than an external force coming in there. It is much more clear now, especially when you talk about China having made the port in Hambantota. There is angst all over India. Why did we allow that to happen? But people don't realize that Sri Lanka approached us for it, and we have a domestic audience to cater. Ours is a very, very complicated country in this regard. So I would agree with Wing Commander Air Commodore Sate, and Colonel Nair, I think, is being a little harsh on the Prime Minister. I think we had no choice because it was ours to go, it was ours to do. But I take the point that he's trying to mention in the sense the men need to know what they are doing. I've got a beautiful example. We set up the first INLTs, the Indian Naval License Teams, in four of the places in Kanakasantra, in Batikalau, and these places. I have actually had a cup of tea with Mr. Prabhakaran. So it was IPKF. It was Indian.
This is the first time you're telling us you had a cup of tea with Prabhakaran.
Yeah. So basically, I'm saying that it was peacekeeping force. He was coming to the camp and going off from the camp. So it is only after that that things turned sour. And interestingly, the orders to catch him came a few hours after he left the camp. So it was, I mean, one can guess probably what was it. So what Colonel Nair is saying, clear directives. Yes, I agree with that part. But to think that we could not have gone there, I think we had no choice but go there. And again, we highlighted in the last episode as well, as far as the tasks that were listed out to the services, to the armed forces, the objectives were met. Even the political objective was actually met. So I don't know where this rhetoric comes about it being a failure. We had no choice. The mismatch was where it was not a whole of government approach. Probably you had RAW playing its own games where the it's also said for a fact that while you are fighting the LTT, you are training the others. So it is a mismatch in not getting into a whole of government approach. But I would think we had no choice going in, and probably a very clear directive like what Colonel Nair said, the soldier asking, "What am I doing here?" So IPKF peacekeeping, we were peacekeeping for some time, and then suddenly it turned around.
Wonderful. I think, what you said, the whole of government approach, and I'm sure, these lessons have been learned, hoisted at the right quarters, even if not acknowledged to the extent that they have been. So, taking this forward, gentlemen, I want to ask you now, uh, what do you think would be lessons for the future? And those lessons can either be in the realm of commemoration itself, it can be in the realm of templates for future such operations. Uh, it has been suggested in some quarters that what the IPKF did provides the perfect or a possible template for a future theatre command. Some others feel that it provides certain lessons in jointmanship. Some others talk about the human interest story. So, going ahead, now that we are 35 years from the event, from the end of it, going ahead, what do our esteemed panelists feel should be the takeaways in any of the spheres, in war fighting sphere, or in human interest sphere, or in template for maritime command sphere? I'd like to ask each one of you to give one or two takeaways for the future. And I'll begin with Fellow Nayan. What are your takeaways for the future? What do you think are the lessons that we need to uh, have learned from Operation Power?
You see, as our political leadership has been very vociferously stating a policy which is called the neighborhood first policy. Basically, it implies that all the territories, all the countries with whom we share borders, we should be concerned about them first. Go back to the Mandala theory of Chanakya. From there, you can drive lessons on as to why I'm saying this. So we in the army, at least, I don't know about the navy and the air force, but at least in the army, we need to create country specialists. One of the biggest drawbacks we found when we were in Sri Lanka was that there was no one who could, know in-depth knowledge about Sri Lanka, knew the language, either Sinhala or Tamil or any other burger language or whatever, and we learned on the job. So there is a requirement to create country specialists at every level, especially now that when we know that theaterization is going to happen. So whichever theater, whether it is going to be the maritime theater, which is going to be responsible for the areas of Sri Lanka and the Indian Ocean region and everybody, there should be a tri-service panel of officers of at various levels, uh, from junior to the highest, who should be trained, deployed in the in country, gain experience over there, and they should have country experience about the neighboring countries. Not that we have any negative intentions towards anybody, but we should not be caught flat-footed once again. And then have to learn on the job and bleed on the job to learn to take those lessons. Secondly, this business of interoperability. We have to have systems working. Like I'll tell you one thing, the ASC has a brick system. When we had a mounting base in Chennai, that mounting base with its personnel is designed to cater for X number of troops in terms of victuals, fuel, arms, ammunition, etc., etc. As and when the numbers go up, they add one more brick to it. They add another brick to it, a third brick to it, and like that, the mounting base expanded. Similar systems must work and must be made available in all to include all the three services, or even the fourth dimension if and when it comes about. All of that should be available for the commander on the spot to be able to deploy his resources in the most optimal manner so that he can get results the way what is expected of him. That is, these are the two big lessons which I took away from Op Pawan.
Air Commodore Sake sir, Colonel Nair has brought up need for greater area specialization and the need for a certain system, a brick system as he calls it, for flexible availability of forces for early deployment. What do you see as you could add to it, or
Yeah.
subtract over
Okay.
there?
Okay. The lessons that I for one, I've been in attack helicopters all my life, and all the time, every time when we have been operating, I've been wearing a formation badge on my uniform, an Air Force uniform. I've been working alongside with the men in greens. Have great respect for what they do and how they do things. But this interoperability, one. Secondly, the connect at the higher level. The connect at the higher level is what has been lacking in our armed forces for a long, long time. For a long, long time. And we always keep talking about it. I was instructor in staff college, I was SI there. We kept talking about jointmanship. But are we really Is there any jointmanship, or we are just jointed together somehow? That is the issue. So, my lessons from Sri Lanka and whatever I've read and whatever I've heard from people is that the real jointmanship, we need to really work towards it and really work very, very hard towards it. Maybe theater command is one area that we are looking at the moment, but there has been lack of jointmanship at all levels, barring at the tactical level, at the friendship level. There was excellent bonhomie, at the ground level. We were all at the tactical level during the operations. We did not know what was happening at the strategic level. So actually, if you ask me, we need to really move towards jointmanship, real jointmanship, if I may call it. That is my lesson from Sri Lanka.
Colonel Kocher, if I can bring you in here, uh, Air Commodore Saki brings out tactically at friendship level there's excellent jointmanship, but it doesn't translate into optimal results at the operational and higher level. And he says, therefore, we need to go beyond the staff college level of jointmanship into real jointmanship. What are your views on that? And would you like to add anything further into the lessons for future?
See, he's got a valid point. At the combat level, the brotherhood is there, but at top level, it gets diluted and tough wars happen. For example, this Andaman and Nicobar command is supposed to be a joint command. It was to snowball into the maritime command. It was the core. Then we have another joint command, which is the Strategic Forces Command. So these two are already there, but operationally only the IPKF is one where a core level almost 80,000 troops, including Navy and resources of the Air Force, were also co-opted. But I feel this will happen because now that theaterization as first step, they've passed an act, to Danda is in place. They've given some powers for administrative and discipline, all these things have come. So when you start operating, different people operate under one guy, that culture will come. It'll take time to mature, maybe a decade or two, but it's good. It's a good first step, and I'm sure this maritime command, which comes up, or whichever comes up, it will be a good thing. And once you are actually you have to have this during peacetime, not during war, like we did. So that it remain a disjointed effort, but they did the best under the available circumstances. Another thing I'll just quickly like to add: the Southern Air Command did commemorate the IPKF last year. So that's a good start. I'm just mentioning it for the benefit of people here and also for the viewers. Last year they
Yeah, that
commemorated Southern Air Command. Yes, IPKF, 29 July.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's an excellent point that you bring. Commander Joseph, the last question to you. You've always been very, very positive in your outlook, and you've seen that generally the discussions after stating forcefully what were some of the problems has finally coalesced into certain positive takeaways to suggest that okay, things have started moving well, and we need to do a bit more, but a start has been achieved. So, what therefore to you would be the significant lessons and pointers from Op Pawan, and how do you view the future? As I'm sure you view it more optimistically than probably many of your contemporaries. Over to you.
Thank you, Srikant. Yeah, actually, lessons learned, there are plenty, because staying there, we learned a lot. I just couldn't help, laughing when Colonel Nair said, no, with due apologies, when you say country specialist. Actually speaking, there were two Malayali officers, me and one more, Colonel, now Commodore, retired Commodore Nambiar. We are across in Sri Lankan soil. So I don't know whether we were sent across with country specialists in mind. We were two Malayalis who were sent across, and every time I spoke, they said, "Don't murder Tamil." So anyway, that aside, interoperability. People mentioned about turf war. Okay, that is one aspect. There's actually a very interesting aspect about, because I was NA to the Sincan, the second Sincan there. There are people aspects. The way the army, the way the navy, the way the air force looks at the mess itself is a very significant, very interesting. Because in the mess, the navy is very strict about the mess timings. The air force is a little lax. The army, it is almost in the control of the officer at what time they come and go. So that itself makes a huge difference. And there are small, the devil is in the details. There are small things like this that actually it will take time. It will take time. We are one. The three services are one. Yet once we break off from India or once we join the academies, once we served in some time, there are minor differences. We often joke the word secure means different in the army, different in the navy, and different in the air force. So it's a very interesting take. Coming back to the lessons learned, I said there are plenty. I talked about shadow water operations initially. I talked about beaching. We actually did combat ops. Jointmanship, yes, plenty again. The first time, we had just come out of NDA. We were young officers. We had our NDA, army counterparts there with you. So it was very interesting getting in there. So there were a lot of things. Maybe another way of looking at the first time, we are looking at an expeditionary force. This is something close to land, so close to India, so we never felt the need in the same way. But tomorrow, India's interests, it can be worldwide, it can be anywhere. We are thinking about being a great nation, a great power. So you need to have an expeditionary force that can reach out to the places wherever Indians are. So this is one step there. The birth of the IMSF, there are plenty. Integrating the Coast Guard, getting the merchant navy in. This is the first time in an actual operation that we did something. There's a takeaway there for each one of us to, take it to the next step. Maritime Command, I think Atul threw that thing of Maritime Command. Yes, people will argue whether the Maritime Command should be one or should be two. But we are a nation again, starved of resources. They can be parked in one place and augmented accordingly. But there's also an idea in having a contingency. Somebody has to be close by also. So maybe two fronts, the way it is right now, a west and a east. West looking after everything west, east looking after everything east, and then throw in the ambit of having an expeditionary force with your tankers, with your replenishment groups, with your amphibious ships. So they are available at some time. So you're looking at a navy that or a nation that is trying to establish itself worldwide. Thank you.
many aspects that you brought out in your answer, in a way, it traces what is the large trajectory of issues covered under the ambit of Operation Pawan, and we can keep talking about all these. And I'm sure we'll all recognize that we still not have spoken about several human factors, several other aspects. The little bit of mirth and fun that could be had when people are there for 2 or 3 years together, the bonhomie amongst the services. I think this Operation Pavan tells us a lot, and perhaps we need to do a lot more episodes about this. But for our listeners and viewers, I'd like to remind them that this is a follow on episode to what we did last year. Last July, we did an episode on Op Pawan. Two of the panelists were the same, wherein we covered certain aspects operationally and tactically what happened. So today we have gone a step ahead in terms of analyzing uh, some of the strategic outcomes, and in terms of uh, talking a bit more about the legacy and commemoration. So, viewers, listeners, it's been wonderful having you with us. Op Pawan gave us lots of lessons. It's been great discussing this with very, very eminent panelists. We look forward to interacting more with them on any subsequent episodes we have on this subject. I would like to thank them all for a lovely, splendid discussion on various aspects of Operation Pawan. Thank you all, gentlemen. It's great having you here from Maritime Conversations and Maritime Knowledge Syndicate. Big, big hurrah. Grateful thanks to you and salute your service in Operation Pavan for the nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.